In a revelation that has stunned Washington and set alarm bells ringing across the Western Hemisphere, recent intelligence leaks suggest that Russia has secretly stationed nuclear-capable weapons in Venezuela, a bold and provocative move that immediately recalls the darkest days of the Cold War. According to officials familiar with the matter, U.S. surveillance satellites and reconnaissance aircraft detected unusual activity near several Venezuelan military installations, including what analysts believe are storage bunkers and transporter launcher systems compatible with Russian intermediate-range nuclear missiles. The discovery marks a dramatic escalation in Moscow's geopolitical posture. By placing nuclear weapons just a few thousand kilometers from the U.S. mainland, Russia is signaling that it is willing to challenge Washington not only on the battlefields of Eastern Europe, but also in its own strategic backyard. The implications are profound. A new era of nuclear brinkmanship may be unfolding, and this time we will unpack what actually happened, so stay tuned. Russia's decision to deploy nuclear weapons to Venezuela is a calculated strategic maneuver with multiple layers of motivation rooted in history, deterrence, and geopolitical leverage. For Moscow, the move is a direct response to what it sees as relentless NATO expansion and U.S. military encirclement. Since the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict, the United States and its allies have supplied Kyiv with advanced weaponry, imposed crippling sanctions, and expanded their military presence near Russian borders. By positioning nuclear assets in the Western Hemisphere, Russia is attempting to reverse the strategic pressure, essentially reminding Washington that it too is vulnerable to threats close to home. This is not the first time Moscow has flexed its muscle in Latin America. In 2018, Russian Tu-160 nuclear-capable bombers landed in Venezuela as part of a joint exercise. At the time, the deployment was widely interpreted as a warning shot. But the current situation goes much further, signaling that Russia is prepared to establish a sustained nuclear presence just south of the U.S. border. The deepening military cooperation between Moscow and Caracas is another key piece of the puzzle. Isolated by U.S. sanctions and facing economic collapse, the government of Nicolas Maduro has leaned heavily on Russian support, from financial aid and oil deals to intelligence and security assistance. In return, Venezuela has offered Russia a strategic foothold in a region traditionally dominated by American influence. For Maduro, hosting Russian nuclear weapons serves multiple purposes. It deters potential U.S.-backed attempts to overthrow his regime, enhances his domestic legitimacy by projecting strength, and positions Venezuela as a pivotal player in global power politics. For Moscow, the alliance offers a launchpad for projecting power far beyond Eurasia, one that could complicate U.S. strategic planning for decades to come. Russia's nuclear deployment in Venezuela cannot be understood in isolation. It's part of a broader strategic rivalry that has defined U.S.-Russia relations for decades, a race for nuclear superiority that remains as intense today as it was during the Cold War. Russia currently maintains the world's largest nuclear arsenal, with over 5,800 warheads, slightly more than the United States. Its strategic triad, land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and strategic bombers, remains the backbone of its deterrent power. Systems like the RS-28 Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile, capable of carrying up to 15 warheads and striking targets over 18,000 kilometers away, give Moscow the ability to reach any point on the globe. In addition, Russia's avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicles and Poseidon nuclear-powered underwater drones represent cutting-edge advancements that Washington has yet to fully match. These capabilities are designed to bypass missile defense systems and guarantee a retaliatory strike, ensuring that Russia retains second strike capability even in the event of a U.S. first strike. With such technology deployed near U.S. shores, even in small numbers, the strategic calculus changes dramatically. American missile defense systems, optimized for threats from across the Atlantic or Pacific, would have little time to react to launches from the Caribbean. That vulnerability is precisely what Moscow wants Washington to consider. The United States remains the only peer competitor to Russia in nuclear power, with roughly 5,200 warheads and a similarly robust nuclear triad: land-based Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile, Ohio-class submarines armed with Trident II missiles, and B-52 and B-2 strategic bombers ensure a credible deterrent force capable of devastating retaliation. However, much of America's nuclear strategy is based on forward deterrence, projecting power through overseas bases, missile defense networks, and alliances. A Russian nuclear foothold in Venezuela undermines this doctrine by placing Washington on the defensive, forcing U.S. planners to consider a scenario where their homeland faces immediate, close-range threats. The deployment also ties directly into the ongoing war in Ukraine, where nuclear deterrence looms large over every strategic decision. Russia has repeatedly reminded the West of its nuclear capabilities, from putting its deterrent forces on heightened alert to testing advanced delivery systems as a warning against deeper NATO involvement. Now, by physically positioning nuclear weapons in the Western Hemisphere, Moscow is taking that strategy to the next level. It signals that the conflict is no longer confined to Eastern Europe. It's a global confrontation between two nuclear superpowers. And in this broader struggle, Russia's willingness to push the limits of deterrence gives it a psychological and strategic edge. For Washington, this is a nightmare scenario, a two-front competition where it must support Ukraine in Europe while defending its own hemisphere from a newly proximate nuclear threat. And for Moscow, that dual pressure is precisely the point: to stretch U.S. capabilities, test its resolve, and demonstrate that Russia remains a superpower capable of challenging American dominance anywhere in the world. For now, the presence of Russian nuclear weapons in Venezuela has transformed a regional crisis into a global power struggle. It's a stark reminder that the nuclear rivalry never ended. It simply evolved. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.